In this segment, we'll discuss the basis for the CCI and our methods for developing it. Working with organizations to improve their conflict management practices taught me that something like the conflict climate inventory is needed. It just became more and more apparent that conflict management training, even when combined with structural and policy changes, rarely produced the major improvements that client organizations hoped for. Many other factors in the organization's culture, such as personal relationships in the work unit, existing behavior patterns during conflicts, formal and informal power and status, all tended to influence how individuals deal with conflict when they arise. We needed to understand these factors in order to figure out how to make real and lasting improvements. So beginning in 1990, we scoured the literature on how conflict is managed in organizations and what influences conflict management behavior. We studied theory and research on organizational cultures, a body of work that's grown significantly since the early 1980s. We studied the work on a closely related concept, organizational climate, and also the work of Charles Redding on communication climates in organizations. We combed through the research on conflict management in general, and more specifically in organizations. And we dug into the work on mediation and organizational ombudsman. Our extensive review of that literature enabled us to identify 16 aspects of organizational culture that influence, either positively or negatively, the behavior of members when they encounter conflict. We refer to those aspects as dimensions. The concept of organizational climate comes closest to describing how the work environment affects people's actions when they handle conflicts. Organizational climate has been defined as the shared perception of the way things are around here and the psychological environment in which organizational behavior occurs. W. Charles Redding, who pioneered the study of organizational communication, observed that the communication climate of an organization is more crucial than our communication skills or techniques in creating an effective organization. Although climate is composed of many different variables, organization members tend to experience climate as a unified whole, as an overall sense of what it feels like to work here. And they act, at least in part, based on how they experience the climate. So we use the term climate in the name of our instrument, and the CCI includes dimensions such as structure, culture, communication patterns, personal relationships, and existing conflict practices, all of which affect climate. Research on conflict management and outcomes identifies which practices are helpful and which practices are harmful to the individual and to the organization. Research on organizational climates, cultures, and communication patterns identifies how those broader patterns influence individuals in their handling of conflict. Having identified the 16 dimensions, we developed the questions and tested them for face and content validity, then refined the questionnaire. Each dimension is measured by 2 questions, one asked in a positive frame and one asked in a negative frame. Positive and negative questions are distributed randomly throughout the questionnaire. Responses are marked on a 5-point Likert type scale, from 1, strongly disagree, to 5, strongly agree. This approach creates a scoring scheme that locates scores relative to 0, a neutral effect, for easy visual interpretation in charts. The resulting 32-item questionnaire measures all 16 dimensions related to conflict management based on research. At the same time, it minimizes cost to the organization in participant time and effort. The results provide a measure of how and to what degree the climate of an organization is influencing the conflict behavior of its members. The CCI is unique among conflict instruments because it is diagnostic at the organizational or unit level, not at the individual level. The CCI overall climate scores have been normed in 48 organizational units representing a variety of organizations, including universities, small businesses, manufacturing and service firms, medical units, and nonprofits. We can therefore compare an organization's overall climate scores to an average of scores across a variety of work settings. As we collect more data, norms for each of the dimensions will be developed. It's important to mention 4 key points about the CCI as an assessment tool. 1. We developed the CCI to be used as a diagnostic tool to pinpoint problem areas in real-world circumstances. It's not intended as a scientific research instrument. The questions are not psychometrically designed. As a diagnostic tool, it serves well as an objective, detailed snapshot of current conditions and their influence on members, making clear where attention is required to significantly improve conflict management. Users have affirmed the CCI's diagnostic utility. 2. Information from the CCI is descriptive of the participant group only and should not be used to characterize other groups or the organization as a whole. In addition, because the representativeness of the sample of participants is uncertain, use of statistical significance tests to measure differences between groups is not warranted and should be avoided. 3. To ensure that members can honestly respond to questions without fear of reprisals, their individual responses must be kept anonymous. We accomplish this by distributing random login codes to access an online survey. With this method, participants' responses are kept in a database that's external to the organization, and answers cannot be linked to individuals. 4. Given that CCI data are anonymous, not connected to identifiable individuals, it is often advisable to follow up with confidential interviews to clarify diagnostic conclusions. This additional investigation can uncover specific conditions that are not identifiable in the more general questions posed by the CCI. So let's recap by answering these 3 questions. Why was the CCI developed? How was the CCI developed? And what are some important points to remember about the CCI? Why was the CCI developed? We needed a reliable way to measure aspects of organizational climate that affect the ways members handle conflict so that real, lasting improvements could be made. How was the CCI developed? Through comprehensive review of the research, development and testing of a 32-item questionnaire, and norming in 48 organizations. The CCI will be revised as additional research emerges. And what are important points to remember about the CCI? It's a precise diagnostic tool, not a research instrument. It's anonymous to promote honesty, and it generates a profile of the conflict climate dimensions, but specific conditions and dynamics may need further investigation.